Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, dear colleagues around the world. Thank you very much for joining us today for our International Translation Day webinar 2025. We are very happy to be together today again because every year International Federation of Translators brings together translators, terminologists, and interpreters to discuss a topic which seems urgent for the present time. And we're very happy that some years ago, and exactly in 2017, a historical milestone has been reached for professional translators, interpreters, and terminologists, with the United Nations recognizing the International Translation Day as one of the UN official holidays. So we are talking about AI and the trust equation, rethinking education and training in the age of intelligent systems. The Statutory Congress elected the new president who is going to greet you in a few moments. But before that, I would like to say that this webinar has been prepared by the External Partnerships Committee of the International Federation of Translators by Alison Rodriguez, Jorgen Wind, by myself, Olga Igorova, by Victoria Solnik-Kultz, and I'm going to moderate the event today. I would like to give the floor to our newly elected president, who is going to greet you and say a few words about FIT, about the holiday, and about what is going to happen. So Guillaume Deneuve-Burg, the floor is yours. You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Olga. And of course, let me also thank the other members of the FIT Standing Committee for External Partnerships for organizing today's event. So Jorgen, Alison, and Victoria. And needless to say, a huge thank you as well to our speakers, Maria Chiara, Juan Carlos, Philippe, and Irene. Thank you very much for being here, and I'm really looking forward to this webinar. So in the troubled times our profession is going through, visibility is more needed than ever. And this is exactly one of FIT's missions, offering our profession the visibility it deserves, showing what we do and reminding the world how essential we are. And it's my honor to be part of that process today, together with my fellow council members and all our member associations worldwide. And in that context, this year's theme, Shaping a Future We Can Trust, couldn't be more timely. As you may have seen, a recent study by Microsoft researchers identified translators and interpreters as the top occupations where AI can be applied. And as we all know, such messages do not help. It doesn't help the next generation to believe our profession has a future they can truly trust. It doesn't help colleagues, translators, interpreters, and language professionals of all kinds to trust that their profession can provide them with the stability and the recognition they deserve. And it doesn't help end users either, who, on the contrary, tend to place too much trust in new tools, sometimes with devastating consequences. And in the meantime, the very idea of international dialogue and multilateralism, so the belief that people and nations can achieve more together than apart, is being challenged. Some international institutions themselves are under fire, as we saw during the last UN General Assembly just a few days ago. So in this context, ITD is one way of restoring genuine trust by offering the visibility our profession deserves for the next generations, for professionals in the field, and for society at large. And like you said, Olga, ITD is so much more than just a date on the calendar. It's a tribute to the work of language professionals, a day that has a special resonance for us all. And this is why, like you said, in 2017, following a motion initiated by FIT, the UN General Assembly adopted a resolution recognizing, and I quote, the vital role of language professionals in connecting nations and strengthening peace and security. And speaking of peace, I would like us to take a moment to think of our colleagues working in crisis settings worldwide, often in the most difficult and dangerous circumstances, sometimes literally on the front lines of war. FIT is, of course, apolitical, but we cannot ignore the reality of the world around us. And in this context, more than ever, translators and interpreters play an absolutely essential role in fostering dialogue and mutual understanding. They deserve our admiration and, above all, our support. So I would like to dedicate this ITD to them. Happy ITD to everyone. Excellente journée mondiale de la traduction à toutes et tous. Feliz Día Internacional de la Traducción a todos y todas.
Thank you very much, Guillaume.
Olga,
Thank you,
back
Mr.
to you.
President, for such inspiring intervention. You've said all the important things, and now I'm very happy to introduce the panelists before giving them the floor to the first one. We are very happy to have such a diverse group of experts and professionals with us today. And our panelists today are Professor Maria Chiara Russo, Professor of Spanish Linguistics and Interpretation at the Department of Interpreting and Translation of the University of Bologna, alma mater, Forlì campus, who is also the Bologna University Rector's Delegate for Multilingualism and a Council member of SUTI. The next panelist is Mr. Juan Carlos Jimenez Marin, Director General for DG Logistics and Interpretation for Conferences in the European Parliament. After Juan Carlos, we'll have the intervention by Mr. Philip Bimstein, Professor in the University of Utah's Honors College, alternative classical composer, ex-mayor, punk rocker. And then our fourth panelist is Miss Irene Zhang, Professor, Dean of the Graduate Institute of Interpretation and Translation in Shanghai International Studies University. So you see, we are very diverse from the point of view of geography, gender, topics, purely translation, interpretation, and outside opinions. It's going to be a very interesting ITD webinar. I am glad to give the floor to our first panelist, Maria Chiara Russo. You're welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Olga, and good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, good evening. First of all, I wish to thank the External Partnership Standing Committee of FIT for their very kind invitation. I'm really honored. So as an educator, I often wonder what we can do to promote trust, peace, and justice while performing our functions as trainers and professional interpreters, especially now in the age of artificial intelligence, which is full of promises and challenges for the profession. And I also like to explore how best to equip our trainers. This is the outline of my presentation. As regards the first point, investigate and reflect, we can certainly encourage our students to become aware of the role of interpreters in war scenarios and humanitarian settings by writing their master's or PhD thesis. Here you can see some examples of theses I supervise in my department. So the first one, my thesis, Beatrice surveyed the services provided, the working and salary conditions, possible gaps, level of training or lack of. This type of study shows that there is a huge demand for qualified interpreters, but there are also critical issues, given what is at stake. The second thesis, by Silvia Certi, she could collect narratives and interviews, discovering that some of the ad hoc interpreters acting in that period were also partisan relays. They were risking their lives to help partisans. This sheds light on their courage and determination to save other people's lives, which went well beyond their interpreting role. One of the PhD theses by Leonora Bernardi, and incidentally she won the 2025 SUTI Awards for the best PhD thesis, Well, in the 90s, wars broke out very close to our borders, and Eleonora wanted to find out the interpreters' working conditions, their qualifications, the best and worst practices, by interviewing interpreters who were active in that period, and military personnel as well. She collected an enormous amount of valuable documentation materials, very useful also for the history of interpreting. And finally, the most recent thesis by Sara Polidoro, where she interviewed interpreters in Italy and in the Czech Republic who work with the Ukrainian refugees to understand their psychological challenges, especially vicarious trauma and post-traumatic stress disorders, how they cope with them, and which resources need to be developed with a view to shaping context-specific training courses. In the Q&A session, I'll be glad to go into deeper detail and explain lessons learned by theses. Now, the second activities we carried out to raise awareness is preparing trainees to interpret for refugees in emergencies. In 2022, we had two different experiences. First, organizing a crash course for Ukrainian students at the University of Bologna. These were students of different degree courses other than interpreting, who wanted to help their fellow nationals coming to Bologna. So we mainly taught them basic interpreting techniques, code merits, and self-care to prevent vicarious trauma. It was moving to see their commitment. The second experience entailed preparing our interpreting students to work as volunteers for Ukrainian refugees in Bologna City Hub and primary school. They already had interpreting skills and ethical awareness, but it was necessary to organize also debriefing sessions with emergency psychologists to cope with emotional burden. Some of the lessons learned by these students I'll be glad to talk about in the Q&A session. Traditional interpreter education programs have had to introduce digital technologies, both to train student interpreters with virtual working environment simulations, remote teaching and examination platforms, video-based and telephone interpreting, but also to let training practice with interpreting technologies for various tasks, create specialized corpora, extract terminology, manage documents and glossaries, use remote simultaneous interpreting platform. These technologies are known as computer-assisted interpreting training tools, or FIT tools, and computer-assisted interpreting tools, or TIE tools. As to computer-assisted interpreting training tools, these range from speech repositories to websites collecting all sorts of useful training material, and recently to tools developed by interpreting scholars for managing tasks before, during, and after an interpreting assignment, for instance, Interpret Ban developed by Claudio Contimoli. In our department, IT technician Gabriele Carioli and a colleague interpreter researcher Nicoletta Spinolo developed two open access tools. Rebooth, virtual classroom with 8 to 10 booths, indispensable during the COVID-19 pandemic, but still in use for the M8 entrance examination, and InTrain, peer-to-peer training to practice after the contact hours with a trainer. So they are open access, so you can freely use them. You can download them freely. As anticipated today, remote simultaneous interpreting platforms are used daily in multilingual meetings, both in the institutional and private markets. Therefore, interpreter trainees need to familiarize and practice with several platforms, and as many as possible. The most recent developments of remote simultaneous interpreting platforms are advanced KAI tools combining automatic speech recognition and artificial intelligence, the so-called digital movement, like Interpret Bank, Congress Module, SmartTel, which was developed by an international consortium, we were part of this, and the artificial movement developed by Barbertran at the University of Ghent and tested with European Parliament interpreters. These software can help simultaneous interpreters by visualizing on one screen in real time the full transcript of source speech input, particularly useful for difficult accents, or just the so-called problem triggers, namely numbers, named entities, specialized terms, and acronyms with their translation, thanks to the AI integration. Interpret Bank and SmartTel were tested in education settings. Interpret Bank by Frank and Pantimoli in 2021, and SmartTel by our research team in Foley. We tested SmartTel with 24 interpreting students at the end of their second year, and we did find statistically significant improved accuracy with less semantic errors and omissions. But as to poor usability and user satisfaction, our students did say that they would have needed more training with the tool before actually using it. And as to the use of digital technologies and artificial intelligence and generative artificial intelligence in particular, we know that there is an ongoing debate on the use of such developments, focusing also on ethical issues and data privacy protection policies. However, these are already being widely used by students, for instance, to produce text or essays. So some applications could be properly tested before their introduction in interpreter training. Some comparative studies on generative AI applications and teaching activities have appeared in public service interpreting. As far as conference interpreting is concerned, the integration of ASR and AI in the workflow for interpreters is being tested and slowly spreading on the market. Here, the products I just mentioned. As for interpreter education, looking at the ads of websites in the internet concerning the use of AI for training, a lot is being offered and promised indeed. Webinars, self-paced student learning solutions, multicultural sensitivity announcement solutions, real-time feedback systems, etc. However, we do need to test them in the classroom, indeed. Present generative AI applications include useful chatbots for pre-assignment documentation and terminology extraction by means of extremely focused contextualized content, generation of specific speeches by controlling the level of difficulty, mode, topic, terminology, etc., and text-to-speech conversion software with hundreds of different voices and accents for practice. Then also speech-to-text software to transcribe and evaluate students' own performance to quickly spot areas for improvement. Finally, last point, sharing technologies for training in complex scenarios. Our Reboost platform is also used since 2022 by the master's course Conference Interpreting at Caribbean National University to train students remotely. I do feel that collaboration between universities and interpreter education programs is key to promoting peace and trust. And to conclude, I subscribe Paul's statement. Artificial intelligence for education must encourage human action and accountability. Artificial intelligence should support human educators, not replace them. Maintaining a human-centered approach ensures that education remains a social and democratic process. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Maria Chiara, for this very important contribution. And I would like to stress what you said in the very end, that cooperation between universities is a key issue to keep peace and trust there, because we are actually those organizations and people who, in every conflict situation, no matter what is happening in the world, we are supposed to keep people together. That's our mission, and that's what you've been talking about. So very important, keeping people together, whether it is to deal with certain conflicts, including military ones or artificial intelligence. So keeping together educators and students is very important. It's a bridge. it's a community. We should be together. Now I'm happy to give the floor to our second panelist, Director General for Logistics and Interpretation for Conferences of the European Parliament, Mr. Juan Carlos Jimenez Marin. You are very welcome, Juan Carlos.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all the participants. Thank you, dear Olga, dear Guillaume. It is really a privilege to be part of this panel together with the other distinguished colleagues. And I've been asked to talk about precisely synergies among language services, but also with the other stakeholders to assist current and future professionals in their adaptation to a changing working environment. And I would also like to briefly touch upon the opportunities, but also the potential risks with AI in conference interpreting in international organizations or European institutions, such as mine, the European Parliament. First of all, I would like to say, because I would like to avoid any misunderstanding, that I do have high hopes about the possibilities AI and new technologies will offer to the profession. But contrary to what happens in translation, in interpretation, there is no room for post-editing because whatever AI produces in interpretation must be ready for immediate consumption by the client. In our cases, mainly the members of the European Parliament, but also many other high-level political guests, inter alia from other institutions, from international organizations, governments and parliaments from EU and third countries. As you possibly know, some of the international organizations have been carrying out tests recently and already since a couple of years, together with the developers of AI-generated interpretation tools. And these tests, some of them as recent as 3 months ago, have clearly shown that industry is nowhere near to being able to replace human interpreters, at least as far as political conferences and meetings, such as the ones we service in international organizations and the European institutions, are concerned. I'm not even sure whether we are getting any closer to that scenario. Because whereas tests show that there has been some progress in some features, such as the voice, the intonation, and the general packaging of the message, there are major problems with latency, with speed, with output, and most importantly, there's even been some degree of regression in accuracy of the message in comparison to tests carried out some years ago. Why is that? Well, it seems that AI has one major shortcoming. It does not distinguish between relevant and irrelevant information in a given context, which means that the more information you feed into the tool, the more you may confuse it, and even more chances there are for the tool to make the wrong choices, which in our contexts is obviously something which can be potentially extremely dangerous and can provoke serious political and diplomatic incidents. OpenAI, the creator of ChatGPT, acknowledged in its own research that large language models will always produce hallucinations, and this due to fundamental mathematical constraints that cannot be solved through better engineering. And this marks a significant admission from one of the AI industry's leading companies. This study, which was published as recently as on the 4th of September, has provided a comprehensive mathematical framework explaining why AI systems must generate plausible but false information even when trained on perfect data. And what is more dangerous still, it presents estimates and sometimes wrong choices as facts. I will not even mention many other factors AI cannot master, such as tone, intent, emotions, cultural context. As powerful as AI may be, it does not read a raised eyebrow or a trembling voice. And these subtleties are what make human interpreters irreplaceable. In fact, the more high stakes the conversation or the meeting, the more indispensable the human interpreter becomes. So the quality and the accuracy of the output is one major issue with AI. But there is another, not least significant issue. It has been mentioned partially by by Maria Rosa. There is another issue which is extremely important. We do not know what happens to the data we feed into the system or the tool. We do not know who has access to these data, who processes them, and for what purpose. And therefore, there is another major issue, which is confidentiality, accountability, data protection, and the risk of rendering our organizations and institutions much more vulnerable to external actors. But I would also like to say that despite all I have said so far, we cannot ignore the profound impact AI is already having on our profession and the fact that it will change the way in which human interpreters work even more in the future. The future of interpreting is not human versus machine, but rather human and machine together. AI can play a major role. It already does as a tool to assist human interpreters in their work before, during, and after their assignments to a meeting. The European Parliament, together with the other EU institutions, has several major projects with industry and academia to develop tools related to meeting preparation, background information, extraction of glossaries, captioning of numbers, acronyms, names, as well as the production of team leader reports for follow-up in case of incidents. The same goes, by the way, for other conference-related services in the back offices, not only for interpreters, where AI can certainly help us concentrate human resources to the more complex but also enriching tasks, while new technologies can take over the more repetitive and less intellectually challenging ones. What does this mean for education and for the new generations who want to become conference interpreters? It means that we need to train interpreters not only in languages, in memory, in note-taking, in simultaneous technique, but also in the use of technology and of AI tools. They must learn to evaluate the output of machine translation systems, to integrate real-time captions into their work, to cope with the additional cognitive load of multiple information while working in the booth, and they need to be equipped to turn AI into an ally rather than a rival. Think of it this way. The invention of the calculator did not eliminate the need for mathematicians. It freed them from tedious arithmetic so that mathematicians could focus on higher level problem solving. And in the same way, AI will not eliminate human interpreters if they are trained to harness technology and if they let the machine free them from certain mental processes in order to deal with the most difficult ones. So interpreter programs at universities need to evolve in order to include modules on AI literacy and the use of other relevant new technologies. If done well, in close cooperation with employers in international organizations and with the developers of such tools, I am confident that we will be able to train future generations of language professionals and conference interpreters who will raise the quality of their work to heights we have never seen before and help shape the future of our profession. For this to become reality, employers in international organizations, practitioners, educators and trainers cannot remain passive, and we must ensure that the next generation of interpreters is not afraid of AI, but empowered by it. We have a common responsibility to provide guidance, to set standards, and to advocate for the unique role human interpreters will continue to play in the future. And I insist, the narrative is paramount if we want to ensure succession planning by attracting younger generations to our profession. We need to convey a loud and clear message, namely that there is a future in conference interpreting for the new generations, and a bright one. In this context, and before concluding, allow me to refer to a declaration the network of heads of interpreting services in international organizations, called HINTS, adopted last week, and I had the honor to host the meeting in the European Parliament of the HINTS. I will read the declaration, which is very short, if I may. On the 25th anniversary of the European Day of Languages, we celebrate conference interpreters, professionals whose expertise, adaptability, and commitment to confidentiality and neutrality have enabled international cooperation in all moments of history. We urge young people to join this dynamic profession and to seize its unique opportunities. Interpreting is a future-facing career. It continuously evolves, shaped by history and increasingly by new technologies. We need new generations of interpreters who are tech-savvy and ready to face change head-on. We declare that qualified interpreters are vital for meaningful participation and genuine equality at any multilingual event. Interpreters have always stepped up and adapted, from the front lines of history to the cutting edge of technology. That resilience continues. Tomorrow's interpreters will help shape the future of multilingual communication. Interpreter training must be championed and supported. We invite aspiring linguists everywhere to consider this intellectually rewarding and socially indispensable career. Finally, we will continue exchanging best practices, supporting each other, and upholding the high standards of our profession demands. The HINTS network believes in the next generation of interpreters who will carry this vital profession forward. So, to conclude, I am convinced that we will all work together to succeed in our common endeavor and ensure that there is a future in language professions, not despite, but together with AI. The same way the profession evolved from consecutive to simultaneous interpretation with the Nuremberg trials in the 1940s, from on-site to remote interpretation more recently, and especially since COVID, I am more than confident that the profession will adapt once again. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Juan Carlos, for this very well-structured and very interesting speech. So what we take away from it is that we need to train interpreters and translators empowered by the AI. As you said, evolved profession. There is also this expression which is used widely now, augmented interpreter or translator, augmented by the AI, but still able to understand what a raised eyebrow means, a handshake or absence of such. Indeed. And for this to continue to what Maria Chiara also said, for this we need to share best practices and work together. Institutions, universities, practitioners, etc. All humans helped by the AI. Thanks a lot. And I'm very interested in hearing what the next speaker has to say to us, because this person is not exactly a translator or an interpreter as such, but has a very interesting profile that you already saw and that we already described. So I'm giving the floor to a person who is a musician, who is a professor and teaches a very interesting course about kindness. He will tell us himself. A composer, an ex-mayor, a punk rocker, and a professor, Mr. Philip Bimstein. The floor is yours. Welcome, Philip.
Thank you very much, Olga, for that warm welcome. And thank you to Guillaume for your inspiring speech, and to Maria Chiara and Juan Carlos. I am very inspired by your talking about empowering us and about emotions, raised eyebrows, and subtleties, some things that I may touch upon. I'm thrilled that you've invited me to join your wonderful webinar, and that I get to be here with all of you, my fellow presenters, and all of you in attendance. I admire so much the work that you do as translators, interpreters, and terminologists, and your promotion of peace and trust in these turbulent times. And I'm humbled to be here because, as Olga said, I'm not a translator or interpreter in the beautiful way that you all are, with your enormously valuable skills for making the words and expressions of a writer or speaker in one language fully understandable in another. I have tremendous respect for your art. Still, while I may not translate in a literal way, I do attempt to convert or translate between different mediums or kinds of languages, such as between music and dialogue, between science and art, and between the mind and the heart. From those perspectives, and hopefully in harmony with the themes and aims of this webinar, I'd like to suggest that in this age of intelligent systems, we can and must sustain and nurture systems that are not only intelligent, but are also systems that care. And you, as essential voices in shaping a multilingual, trustworthy future, you are key to accomplishing that goal. You can vitalize your own authentic voices to shape a future we can not only trust, but a future we can love, because you know how to translate from and to the human heart. Years ago, when I was a Chicago punk rocker, leaping all over the stage, I didn't know I was a translator. And you can surmise from this picture, I probably didn't sound or look like one either. But even at that time, and with those songs, I had the world on my mind. I wrote songs about people around the world, about their stories, about collaboration. Here we go. There, the world is just on top of my head there. And now, thanks to your organization, I've begun to realize that when I wrote songs for my band, I was indeed translating, not from English to French, although one of my songs did, but from story to song. 10 years later, when I was elected mayor of a small town in Utah, I translated the local environment, both musically to express care for it, and politically to protect it. At the same time, I composed works that translated people's oral histories into musical portraits created from the rhythms and patterns of their voices and the unique sounds of their environment, which could include the mooing cows of a local rancher, or the cacophony of a casino, the rattling handcuffs and shackles of a jail cell, or the meows of my own dear cats. Let's see Petra on my piano. Always translating those sounds into music. So, okay, that's good for the pictures. Thank you very much, Victoria. It was while serving my 2 terms as mayor that I noted many similarities between musical and dialogical processes. When I was first elected, we were a very divided town, yet we eventually found common ground by tuning in to what underlies and unites us, just as a sustained bass note in a Bach fugue combines and unites the many contrasting voices above it. In another musical analogy, I chose, as mediators, residents who were capable of bridging the gap between opposing factions because they were like the common tones in 2 conflicting chords. To tie it all together, I conducted town meetings like they were the development section of a Beethoven symphony. While chairing these town meetings, I also noticed that very basic musical skills that are innate to all people were equally valuable and effective in civic dialogue. Skills such as active listening and responding more meaningfully because we truly heard what was said. As jazz musicians say, you've got to listen to the whole band if you ever expect to say something. And in the last few years at the University of Utah, I design and teach courses based on these observations and principles, or you might say these translations, across disciplines, such as the kindness course that I taught at the university's South Korea campus this past summer, when students cultivated and practiced their own capacities for empathy, compassion, and goodwill. I believe we can frame translation and interpretation within the context of kindness, and we can embed our own capacities for kindness within the practices of translation and interpretation. I know you already do that. For just as you translate text or the spoken word from one culture to another, you surely also translate shared connection and feeling, arriving at mutual understanding and trust. You have the skill and the will to translate and interpret the human heart. So I am confident that in this age of intelligent systems, we will sustain and nurture systems that care, as you vitalize your own authentic voices to express and shape a future we can love. In last year's webinar, Christina Valentini spoke of skills in the form of logic. I ask, could we also speak of skills in the form of the human heart? Could we develop a terminology that can not only be conceived by humans, but one that can be felt? Marie Dior beautifully said, interpreters go beyond words and delve down to underlying nuances and emotional undertones, just as Juan Carlos spoke about today. I totally agree. We can indeed shape a future that values such vital nuance and tone. And Professor Ivan Bratko last year asked, can LLMs, speaking of large language models, can LLMs reason? I ask, can LLMs feel? And can they sense and truly understand feeling in others? He also asked, does AI have the ability to reason? I ask, does it have the ability to care? In my own teaching and learning, I am guided by the words of theologians such as Nell Morton, who spoke of hearing others into speech, hearing others into speech. And Martin Buber, who asked us to move beyond I-it relationships to instead foster I-thou relationships, I-thou, where the depth and value of others is always forefront in our minds and hearts. And perhaps the most moving words are on the profundity and power of listening were expressed by Mother Teresa, who, when asked by a journalist what she says to God when she prays, responded, "Oh, I don't say anything, I just listen." And when the interviewer then asked her what God says to her, she replied, "Oh, he doesn't say anything, he just listens." I love that story for what it says about the beauty of being in each other's presence and the power of truly listening. And that is what you all do, what you already do, and you are so good at it. You listen, you hear others into speech, you forge I-thou relationships with your subjects and your audience. For you do what poets and philosophers throughout time try to do. You translate and interpret not only the words, but the feelings from one heart to another. And you are able to do this because you are first in touch with your own heart. You are indeed shaping a future we can trust, and the world will be a better place because of it. So I urge you to always listen to yourselves, to know yourselves, for In order to translate others' hearts, we must first know our own. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. It was really a strong message. I'm sure everybody agrees. I can see lots of hearts here on the screen coming from our listeners, from our participants. It really shows that we need to nurture systems that care, and only humans who are with us today care. I took away some very important notions that you mentioned, that first of all, we educators should teach our students not only critical thinking and analyzing skills to have them always one step ahead of the AI, but we should teach them empathy, compassion, goodwill, as you said. And this way, they, the new generation, can be able to translate the human heart, translate the feelings from one heart to another, and this way nurture systems that can feel, because the artificial intelligence can probably analyze already something, but it cannot feel. So our task is to educate the future generation of that augmented interpreter or translator we spoke about recently, including the ability to feel and interpret and translate feelings. This way, we are going to be unbeatable indeed. So the heart was the key point, the buzzword of this contribution, which we, as I said, saw also on the screen. Thank you very much, Philip, and we'll be looking forward to the questions from the participants after our next presentation. So our final panelist for today is Ms. Irene Zheng from Shanghai, the Dean of Graduate Studies, as I already announced. Irene, the floor is yours. You are very welcome to speak.
Great. Thank you, Olga. Mr. President, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, as Olga said, greetings from Shanghai. As a conference interpreter and interpreter educator, it is indeed a high honor and distinct privilege to be invited by Olga, dear Olga, to be on the panel of this webinar for a perspective probably from Asia or Asia Pacific. First of all, a few words about my home institution, Shanghai International Studies University. It is a leading university of foreign studies in China, and the university has the vision to interpret the world, translate the future. It nurtures professionals with a global outlook who not only command languages, but also understand countries and regions and excel, hopefully, in specialized fields. On the research frontier, we explore domain-specific language AI models to further empower TNI practice and research. We've come to realize that AI is not or should not be seen as a rival to language studies. It is or should be a helpful partner if used properly. AI gives us an invaluable opportunity to work faster, to deliver higher quality products, and unlock the true value of language translation and interpretation. What we have done in terms of understanding AI or understanding technology, large language models, together with iFlyTech, which is China's arguably leading company in automatic speech processing and natural language processing, we have at our institute built a joint laboratory to explore what technology can do, to explore in what ways technology would make sense, when or how should we have AI-assisted interpretation and translation, in intelligent language teaching and multilingual data technologies. I mean, we would have to know what technology can do in order for us to be able to adapt and to unleash the potential of technology. So the university has formed partnerships with more than 470 universities, institutions, and international organizations in over 70 countries and regions. Since 2021, the university hosts the Secretariat of the National Committee for Graduate Education in TNI, GETI for short, which is designated by China's Education Ministry to guide and supervise the TNI education on the postgraduate level. Under this committee, there are now 374 universities that offer Master of TNI programs, and 8 universities out of these 374 have started this year to have the DTI program, Doctor of Translation and Interpretation, which is a professional doctorate in TNI education. So, I mean, China attaches a lot of importance to fostering the growth or the development of TNI professionals, and it has been a national initiative to enhance professional education in T&I. Well, as we all know, I mean, each year, the translators, interpreters, and terminologists would be celebrating the International Translation Day every year on the 30th of September. As already mentioned, alluded to by my previous speakers, in 2017, the 71st session, I think, of the United Nations General Assembly unanimously adopted Resolution A/RES/71/288, recognizing the role of professional translation, well, interpreting for that matter as well, in connecting nations and fostering peace, understanding, and development. And this year's theme, celebrating translation, peace, and trust, translation shaping the future, a future that we can trust. This raises this question of, or the questions that in the era of AI, when AI has been very much around, where are language education and TNI industry heading? How should universities innovate TNI teaching and research? How do we achieve human-machine collaboration and co-creation? So there are other questions as well, as we have heard from my previous speakers and colleagues. That is, does AI have empathy, or is it possible at all for AI to develop empathy, goodwill, or accountability that we take for granted that the human interpreters and translators would readily have? So let's put it this way, or let me put it this way. Language is the cornerstone of human civilization. Language carries with it the logic, the ideas, history, and culture of every nation that is concerned. So learning a different language is not just about mastering a tool. It is about experiencing another culture and gaining a new way of thinking. So this is something that no machine would ever be able to replace, or would it? Language itself, we can say, could have 3 dimensions. Language is a tool. It is a humanistic medium and a scientific object. Language serves as a bridge of communication, the soil that nourishes literature and the vessel of human thought. And language is, of course, a subject of scientific inquiry. It is precisely this scientific dimension with a humanistic touch that my university, my home institution, is now committed to advancing. We are pursuing deeper integration between language science and artificial intelligence, trying to open new frontiers in language education and TNI practice. In the TNI areas or domains or fields, machines can take on routine technical work, but the creative nature of the task makes it impossible to replace. Pre-editing, post-editing, managing cultural nuances, and conveying emotions or intent, all these would demand a human touch. And in high-stakes settings, such as diplomacy and international affairs, responsible human interpreters and translators are indispensable. We come back to this issue of trust. Trust has a lot to do with public perception. According to a publication by Choi and Lim, I think they are two Korean scholars, in 2002, the status of interpreters and translators depend very much on the society in which they belong. Such factors as whether the society is multilingual, monolingual, or and its international standing, all these factors would have an impact on the status of interpreters and translators, and of course, consequently, their financial compensation. With the advent of AI and the rapid breakthroughs of the artificial intelligence technology, the public are getting increasingly susceptible to the alleged sort of the compromise or even demise of the TNI profession. However, if we look at statistics, the Slater 2025 Language Service Provider Index, for example, which is a leading source of research and market intelligence for translation, for localization, interpreting, and language AI. We take India, for example. The combined revenues, the index companies actually grew 6.6% in 2024 to 8.4 billion US dollars of the language service providers reported positive growth. 54% reported positive growth, 40% reported declining revenues, and 6% remained flat. So we can see that this kind of a trend or the situation is still there. And I also spent some time to look at the situation in another East Asian country, in Korea. According to Statistics Korea, registered translation companies rose from 2,429 in 2020 to 2,805 in 2023, because the 2024 data are still pending, which means that the evidence that demand human-led language services remain strong, even as basic machine translation tools proliferate. We have touched upon this a number of times, a couple of times, that AI can pass surface meaning, but AI would struggle with cultural context and emotional nuance, ethical judgment, and situational awareness. I mean, these are the capacities that would go beyond the current existing AI technology. So consequently, artificial intelligence, at least in a short period of time, will not supplant the interpreter's work, especially the sort of high-stake work that I touched upon before. So it's true that many professionals now offload routine tasks to AI and concentrate on more specialized, high-value projects. ChatGPT handles basic translations, and then the human side would focus more on medical documentation, which mirrors healthcare trends, where diagnostic AI augments rather than replaces physicians, the boosting workloads and revenues. And of course, we haven't forgotten China. According to TAC, which is the Translation Association of China, that releases a report of the TNI industry since 2012 or 14, the translation industry output value in China, the number of enterprises, and workforce size, TNI workforce size, showed steady growth in 2024, with a total annual revenue of 70.8 billion RMB, equivalent to approximately 9.85 billion US dollars. The workforce expanded to 6.8 million, and the number of active translation enterprises in China exceeded 650,000, including 14,665 firms specializing in translation services. And the report also finds that market competition has intensified and industry segmentation has advanced. The 2025 China Translation Industry Development Report, the statistics that I've cited just now, is available online if any of you get interested. So in a nutshell, we are living in an interesting era. Never has it been so important before that the complementary nature between artificial and human intelligences be clearly understood. And as Jeffrey Hinton rightly puts it, to the effect that AI has to be used properly by the human race to avoid risks. The UN General Assembly on March 21, 2024, that was last year, adopted the landmark resolution on the promotion of safe, secure, and trustworthy artificial intelligence systems that will also benefit sustainable development for all. And for that, let's work together to ensure a multilingual, trustworthy future. I thank you for listening. Back to you, Olga.
Thank you very much, Irene. A great contribution with a social and cultural context. Indeed, I've seen some comments already in the chat about your contribution, and there are some excellent questions. Thank you very much for giving a general perspective, but also the perspective of the region, which is very important for us, a wider Asian region. So, as I'm looking at lots of hearts and this kind of sounds on the screen, so our panelists were great, and we still have some time for questions. And we are starting with the question. So probably I would like to start with a question for Juan Carlos. And the question is the following. Actually, there are two. The first one is more general. How can we promote our profession to younger generation? And what role do you think government or governments play in promoting our profession? And also the second question is about the declaration that you read, where people can find the link to read it as well. Juan Carlos, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Olga. Thank you very much, dear participants. I will start with the last question because it's the easiest. So the Hinz Declaration has been posted on LinkedIn. So if you look in LinkedIn and you look for my name, you will find the declaration there. Otherwise, as I put on the chat, I have given you my email address. in the chat. And if someone cannot find it, you can contact me via email. As far as the other questions are concerned, the promotion of the profession and the role governments play, well, I think governments are crucial because it's the member states which are responsible for training. So it's not the European institutions, it's not the international organizations. We do not train language professionals. What we do is possibly assist universities, give some induction training once they are trained. But basically, the ones who have to invest in language learning and in training language professionals is the governments. And this is why it's very important that we do work together with the national authorities in the member states, but also beyond, in order to convince them that they need to be on board together with us in order to promote the profession. I'm now talking more in general, not just interpreting. Language professions, they need to be promoted. And for that, as I said also, and others have also mentioned it, for that, it's important that the narrative, the message that goes out is not that AI will take over and replace all of us, but we need to get out the narrative that AI is going to be there as a tool to assist us, to make us more efficient, possibly, to help us in many ways, but it's not going to replace us. So I think we have to work on the narrative bit, because up to not long ago, it was mainly the industry that was shaping the narrative about the future of language professions, and we need to be on board and we need to shape this narrative. So indeed, we are working together in networks like the HINTS, which is a network to reach out to universities who are training conference interpreters mainly, but I think also from YAMLABT or from FIT, I mean, all these associations can certainly help. We need to work together with universities because they are the ones who are going to train language professionals for the future. So I think we need to make a common effort, and we should possibly also develop a common strategy so that we are not improvising, but that we are taking concrete action. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Juan Carlos. Indeed, about the narrative, I think we fully agree. FIT fully agrees, because it's changed with the help of all us working together over the years. For instance, our Congress, FIT World Congress in 2014 in Berlin, had the slogan "Man versus the machine." So it was kind of a war situation, while this latest Congress in Geneva, 11 years later on, is about building an intelligent future, mastering the machine, working together, etc. So that's indeed the narrative we need to further develop together. And I have a very good question for Philip, which is the following. Just a second. Yes. So good afternoon. Being able to concentrate on multiple sources of information and perform multiple actions at once is something that unites musicians and translators. Do you think that musical education and skills, playing an instrument and singing at the same time, for example, can be applied to translation and interpreting? Philip?
Thank you, whoever asked that question. Excellent question. I do feel that musicians, and really, when I say musicians, I mean all of us. Musicians are people who have channeled these abilities and skills into their instrument and into perhaps a career or a hobby that they love. But we all possess the ability to take in many elements of information and to interact with them. And so I do think that music education can enhance that and develop that in children and in adults. I mentioned that, and there's Ingrid Monson, a jazz scholar from Harvard, who quoted a jazz musician saying, "You've got to listen to the whole band if you ever expect to say something." And I think that's I've noticed how the value of that in town meetings, where if you just come in with your sign and what you want to say, but you're not really listening to others, it doesn't have much value. It doesn't really move things forward. So same thing with musicians. If you are collaborating, especially, I mean, this applies to classical musicians or rock bands that are not necessarily improvising, but especially if you're in something like a jazz band, where there is a high level of improvisation, or a bluegrass band, if you're in America, you know what bluegrass music is, or other kinds of experimental music, you will contribute in a much more fruitful way if you've listened before you jump in, because and you can go in a totally different direction, but you've listened to what's happening, you've listened to the context, and then you fit what you have to say, and you maybe formulate what you have to say within that context. So yes, I do believe that musical education, which I don't know about the rest of the world, but is arts education in general, is being diminished to a degree. We need to keep that funded and active, because it's so important for developing the very skills that the questioner asked about, the ability to take in multiple channels of information at once, and to be able to interpret them as you guys do, and then make something meaningful out of it. So I hope that addresses the question. Thank you so much for asking it.
Thank you very much. And speaking from the personal point of view, I would like to say that it really helps if an interpreter and translator like myself can also play a musical instrument. So when you do it in childhood, it really develops your multitasking skills. So we can advise all interpreters and translators who are just starting or thinking about starting to play a musical instrument or to sing or something. Okay, thank you very much, Philip. And our next question goes to Maria Chiara. And the question is, for interpreters and translators who already work in the field and are not involved in conference interpreting, which AI tool would you recommend as a starting point? Which AI tool is, I guess, the simplest, the easiest to find, and the one that you like better?
From what I read from literature, I'm not involved directly in a public statement interpreting or dialogue interpreting. If I understand the question correctly, you're more interested in dialogue interpreting. I read this interesting article which compared 3 different systems, ChatGPT, TWI, and 11 Labs, to assess their effectiveness in generating material for the bilateral interpreting classroom, and then to analyze the students' and teachers' opinions of these materials. So I'll be happy to give you this reference, because I found that a comparative study that was so useful. I must say that from what I read from the literature, it's mainly in Spain that my colleagues are really working and experimenting with generative AI for dialogue and public studies interpreting. There are teaching proposals and that are interesting, both in various universities, of Malaga, Alcalá de Henares, and Public Madrid, etc. Now proposals are coming out to introduce generative AI in the classroom, even our university, or university. This publication in particular, I find particularly inspiring. I'd be happy to put the reference in the chat.
And our next question goes to Irene. Irene, do you have any concerns about how AI might reduce work ethic or skills among students? Is it still necessary to train students to work effectively without AI? For example, in case they do not always have access to AI tools?
Thank you for that great question, because we struggle a lot in deciding when or how to incorporate TI or KAI tools in our teaching. So far, we have decided that in order for our students to truly develop that very essential part of the interpreting skills, for example, active listening, analyzing, reformulation, deverbalization, that sort of essential skills that are so critically important for interpreters, we decided that we go without the KAI tools to begin with, so as to avoid developing that kind of inertia among our students. And I think everybody would understand that you would have to be able to perform interpreting anyway if you don't have any access to the technology, to the AI tools. And I mean, the young generation, the Z generation, put it this way, they are digital natives. I don't think they would have they would have much difficulty trying to use or incorporate the AI tools in the future. So why not have those? I mean, have a reliable, a trustworthy command of the essential skills first before they proceed to have the AI tools or to incorporate the AI, the technology part. So that's how we are doing it. I hope I answered your question, Olga, and thank you for raising that.
Yes, you certainly answered. And it brings me back to remembering how fast things change. Like some 10 years ago, we were discussing, for example, how to deal with those students who want to take notes with their tablets or phones. And we were saying that, well, you can run out of battery, your phone or whatever, so you should be able to take notes with your pen or pencil, which is actually true. You need to be taught how to do it. But the students always answer, well, if my tablet runs out of battery, I have a phone or something else. As you say, the new generation are digital natives, and they would know how to use the tools in the right way. Though we should not forget about this danger of inertia, which you mentioned. So that was a very good reply.
I think it's very important to establish contact with professional organizations, because professional organizations, be that interpreter or translation or translators, do organize stage, just to say internship, where you can be seconded by expert professional, do provide refreshment courses. So it's a way of getting into a community which has already established its links with connections, and this is a way into the market that is, let's say, safer and with the benefit of the experience and expertise of fellow translators and interpreters. So I would say get in touch with professional organizations.
Well, basically, I fully agree with Chiara. I think the important thing is to get in touch with professional organizations. In the case of interpreters, one point of entry to get some information about the profession and possibilities is the IAIC, the International Organization or Association, I should say, of Conference Interpreters. And obviously, you can also get in touch, if you were to be interested, you can also get in touch with the interpreting services of the EU institutions. I don't know exactly where the person is currently located, but I think obviously this is one of the major markets for freelance interpreters in Europe. So that's definitely also a possibility. And then also talking to peers, to colleagues, in the country or in the city where the person is living. I think all these are ways of getting pieces of advice, practical pieces of advice as to how to enter the profession. To start with, that it would be absolutely necessary for someone to indeed make some kind of calculation of what it costs to involve AI and what it would cost not to involve AI. However, I don't think it should be us. It should not be the language professionals, because then everyone will say that the results are biased. So I think these calculations should be done. Neither should it be the industry, by the way, because they too could be biased. So I think it should be neutral. And indeed, I think it's worthwhile asking this question, because sometimes there are certain myths that go around that AI or something else is going to solve all the problems, and it's much cheaper and it's much better and it's much more efficient. And I think we need a neutral voice to let us know. However, I also want to say that unfortunately or fortunately, it depends, industry is often much more powerful than us. So it is quite likely that AI is there to stay, that new technologies are there to stay. We also have to understand, and you've said it yourselves, the new generations have a completely different approach to AI than we have. So I think we need to be prepared for AI being part of our working environment. And it's up to us to help shape this presence and to harness its presence and to, as I said before, and others also, to see AI and new technologies as an ally rather than a rival. I think we all stand to benefit if we have this approach. But I agree, just for the sake of independence, it would be good to have a clear assessment by a neutral stakeholder of what it entails.
Well, I mean, in that kindness course that I taught in South Korea this summer, and in my regular teaching, I include a kindness practice, a traditional one from thousands of years ago, and it doesn't have to be that particular one, but to cultivate the skills of the quality of listening to yourself and others, and knowing that you connect to others and care about others. I think that. I don't know about the budget, but I think that if employers could encourage maybe their interpreters and translators to be in touch with their own hearts. And there are practices that are available online and in books and from teachers to plant the seeds of connection, to be aware and to develop gratitude. And it's sort of a turning within before you go without, although it can be both directions, so that you are aware of your gratitude for being a living human being, and being aware of the connection that you have, because everyone shares those feelings and those say bodies and elements of the earth. And so I don't know if I'm answering the question appropriately or not, but I think it's turning people within to appreciate their own qualities as well as appreciate others, and then to make those connections. I don't know if that helped, if that answered the
That
question.
helped a lot, because it's
Okay, thank you.
a step up. Like some years ago, we talked about educating the employers, explaining to them that interpreters and translators are doing their job, etc. And now it's a new step of educating the employers about what it is to work with a human as
Yes.
opposed to AI. We have really a lot of questions today, really many questions, and we would stay here for at least 5 or 6 hours to answer all those questions, which is a shame that we cannot, because it's more or less time to wrap up. But I would like to ask my colleagues now to show themselves, all those who were involved in preparing this wonderful webinar. I would like FIT President to show himself. Guillaume, if you're here. Yes, and all the panelists and the external partnerships team. Jorgen, Alison, Victoria, all are here. Have a very happy International Translation Day. Let's think about all different ways of promoting our profession, helping it evolve, nurture the systems that can feel and work together with the artificial intelligence.